Hi and welcome. Alrighty, so I've got the back of the first plate, and I can tell it's the first plate because it's got one stripe on the side, and the stripes are closest to the top, so this is the bottom, which is where I want. And I've cleaned them off with some acetone, and this is just a little 1/4-inch aluminum plate here, and I'm just going to line it so that two edges are lined up with the 90 degrees so I can cut my slots. Yeah, there's no particular importance. I could have this inset, I could have it sit flush. I'm going to have it sort of sit close to the edge, and I think I'm going to try using some super glue. Tom used Loctite 380. I don't know, that's essentially a super glue that's reinforced, so I'm going to go for non-reinforced. Hopefully it'll come off easier when I'm done, because I want to clean the backs. I'd like them. I may decide to at some point use the backs, even though this one got damaged when I was grinding through a screw up. That's when I discovered that when I take my surface, it's an 6x18 surface grinder, but it has like 9 inches of throw. But if you go all the way to the inside, it lifts up like 3/1000ths and or 4/1000ths, and that's what caught the wheel. So anyways, I learned that lesson. When they say 6x18, that's usable range. These are the two lapping compounds I'm going to use. I think I may only use the finer of the two because these were already surface ground. So this is 35 micron, and that actually isn't really very fine, but we'll give that a shot once I get these cross grid put in. And so we're just going to glue this up next. If I only use a little bit of super glue, I will wrap my glue containers with electrical tape and stretch it around the joints to try and give it a good airtight seal. We'll see if that worked. I'm not convinced that it actually did, but so I'm going to center this guy. I think I'm going to flip the aluminum and line it up here instead. So we're going to dab on some super glue if it's still liquid. Feels like it's liquid in there, but it's clogged at the tip. Okay, so there is still some super glue liquid in there, but it did clog the rest of it up. And I just need to spread a thin film around. I'm sure this is going to be fun to clean off when I'm done. Just going to let this cure. So if you wondered how this was going to work, so you basically just tilt this up on one side, do your grooves this way, tilt it up on this side, do your grooves this way, 90 degrees apart roughly. It's not precision, doesn't have to be precision. All right, so over here on the sliding bandsaw, and I'll show you my setup. It's pretty straightforward. So the aluminum plate is glued to the steel round to give me my 90 degrees. I've got a welding clamp here that I double-sided taped, sticky taped some brass on so I wouldn't scratch this up. I've got a piece of 1/2-inch stock here between the edge of this plate here, between the edge of the aluminum plate and this magnetic base. So what I'll do is, I'm going to do the cut. When I'm done, I take this piece out, slide it over till it touches the magnetic base, clamp it down, put the spacer back in, put the magnetic piece back in, and do that ballet over and over. And I've got my depth set, I think, right. This is going to be a pretty big cut. This is an 8-inch diameter circle. All right, so we're going to give this a shot here. This will be the smallest cut of the whole thing. Okay, I think we're there. So now what I do is push the saw back, I loosen the clamp, I take my 1/2-inch spacer out, Clean the debris out of the way. Slide this over till it touches the magnetic block. Now release the magnetic block. Put my 1/2-inch spacer back in. Put it flush. And do the next one. And it's going to be this over and over. Until we're there. And that's it. One more time. So leave everything tight. Loosen the clamp. Pull out the 1/2-inch spacer. Clear debris out of the way. Slide this plate over until it stops. None of this has to be precision, by the way, so then I loosen the magnetic block, put my spacer back in, re-engage, and cut my next one. Now I've just rotated the aluminum block 90 and I'm going to go the other way. So the first one I set, this isn't exactly 1/2 inch. I noticed it didn't end up symmetrical, so I came in a little more than a 1/2 inch for the first cut. So for the first one, I'm going to go the opposite direction. So I loosen my clamp, remove my spacer block, clean out the debris. Trying to keep this perpendicular as possible. Move over the distance of the spacer block. Reclamp. Move my magnetic spacer block. Put my spacer back in. And again, none of this is precision operation. All right, so there's the first one done. It took about 45 minutes, so I have 2 more to do. Now, just in case it kicked up any burrs, I'm gonna use my precision ground flat stones. And the sawing did not kick up any burrs to speak of, which is nice. It's essentially not removing any material. You see it not scratching, and I'm on the coarse side. So once I remove the backing plate off this and do the other ones, we'll be ready to lap these together towards each other. And you'll notice over here and over here there's a little bit bigger space on both sides. That's because I didn't want to get too close to the edge. I sort of learned from Tom's thing. I probably could have done one more on this side and gotten away with it, and maybe even one over here, but I don't see any point getting that close to the edge. I think it'll work just fine like this. All right, so to get super glue off, one of the tricks is just to heat it up. And we're going to give that a shot. Tom just banged his. I don't know. Super glue tends to make a fragile joint. Let's see, my precision sides. So my square sides are here and here. So my square sides are here and here, so I don't want to damage those. Another way I could do this, I have a hot plate. I could just set this on the hot plate at the right temperature and wait for it to get there and just pop it off. But that would heat the base material an awful lot. So a little bit of heat. and I just tapped one corner. I was worried about bending it. That's why I didn't do that sooner. But I just tapped one corner and off it popped. So I just got to clean off the super glue off the bottom of this. And a lot of that, since this was a ground surface, I would expect that you just scrape it off. And the rest can come off with acetone. So one thing I found useful for getting the super glue off is the single edge razor holder. It's a scraper holder, and I can get the majority of it off really quickly. It also, of course, doesn't hurt that it's already pretty flat because it's surface ground. I was doing this by hand, and I remember I had this. This makes really quick work of it and doesn't scratch the surface as much. Then I follow up with acetone to get the residue off. I finished grooving all the plates over the weekend, and now I'm back to continue working. While I'm not doing anything on these with cast iron to try and prevent flash rust, I find that putting a towel over it helps. Like my Kurt Vise always has a towel over it when I'm not using it. You would think humidity would go through it, but for whatever reason, it seems to protect against it. So there are the 3 plates in their nearly finished state. And when they were done, I took my precision ground flat stones to see if there were any burrs from the sawing process. There's swarf in the grooves, which I need to clean out. But you notice the precision ground flat stones don't scratch it noticeably. But they did pick up burrs in case there were any. And that's a very handy feature. So I guess the next thing to do is to do the 3-plate method, and I will do my best to explain the 3-plate method and how it works. Basically, I didn't have to surface grind these. I didn't have to do anything with these. These could have been 3 chunks of random shaped steel, and if you're willing to put in enough effort, the 3-plate method will ultimately yield 3 arbitrarily flat surfaces. And by arbitrarily flat, I mean that you can make them as flat, more or less, as you want by just doing more and more work, essentially. You have to be really, really careful about it, and there's probably some limit on the extreme end of flatness on how flat you can get it, only based on geometry and physics. You know, just the fact that one plate lying on top of another one will distort it a little bit. But for practical purposes, you can make an exceptionally flat plate using this method, starting with just completely random cut pieces of metal if you want, or stone or anything else. So let me see if I can explain how this works. All right, so there's the 3 plates initially, and they're randomly rough relative to each other. And you notice they're not at all flat. They're curved, some concave, some convex. So what you do is you start by taking a reference plate. I'm going to make number 1 my reference plate. And you put B on one and you massage it, and you put some abrasive between the 2 plates, and you go back and forth in a W pattern, clock at 45, W pattern, clock at 45, W pattern, until you've done a full 360. And then you rotate a full 360 so that you try and wear it as evenly as possible. Now you would think that may be enough to make 2 perfectly flat plates, but in reality, it's actually not enough. So the second stage, so if I have this reference plate and I first put plate B on A and braid them together, and then I put C on A and braid them together, there is a possibility, and actually a sort of a likelihood, that they will end up like this. So it turns out that the plate on top tends to wear more in the middle, and the plate on the bottom tends to wear more on the edges. Now this can be microscopic, but it's how one becomes convex and the other concave, and the other becomes convex. So the 2 plates on top, this is A plate, this is B and C over here, flipping B on A and then C on A will yield a slightly convex A and slightly concave B and C, okay? So then what you do is you take B on C and you put them together, and they're basically double the error that they individually had, And when you take B on C after, you will end up with relatively flat and ultimately flat B and C. And then you take B and C and put A on top of them and go back and forth, and it will flatten A as well as the final step. Except you've got to do this process over and over and over again each time you get closer and closer, because in reality, you put C on B, they won't be perfect. So you do C on B and B on C and try and get it close, but whichever one was last on top is going to be slightly concave, and the one on bottom will be slightly convex. And each time you iterate, they'll get better and better and better until you end up with arbitrarily flat surfaces, or nearly so. So that is where I'm headed next. So I'm kind of curious before I start the flattening process. I've blued one of the plates up, number 1, and I'm going to try and put number 2 on top of it here gently. See how flat it is. Ugh, these are heavy. And interestingly enough, even though I thought I got all the burrs, let's see if you can see over here. You can see just the edges of the squares are making contact, which means they're raised relative to the center. So nowhere near as flat as I thought it was right from the get-go. Now I'd be kind of curious if you took it over the surface grinder and dusted it off, if you could fix that, but since we're going to lap these against each other anyways, that'll probably fix that anyhow. But I'm a little surprised at how much of a burr is actually still remaining on these plates. Alrighty, so I've marked with a paint marker just an orientation point 1, so that I know when I've gone a full 360, and I've done that on every one. Label this one 1, 2, and 3 for the other 2 blocks. I'm going to try and start with a 35 micrometer abrasive. This is a non-charging abrasive. Originally I thought I'd go straight to the fine diamond, but that seems like that was just a little bit too optimistic. So we're going to mix up some of this, and we're just going to load the abrasive in here. I honestly don't know how much it takes. Maybe there's a piece of paper in there. Maybe they actually tell you. As a suspension medium, I am going to use lighter fluid, as Tom Lipton recommended. It's a really light petroleum product. Seems like it'd be a good choice. Probably shouldn't start any fires while I'm doing this. And as Tom said, you have to shake it every time you use it. Okay. Getting in the grooves is just wasting it. Okay, so I have plate number 2 on top, and you overlap by just a slight amount and go in a W pattern. Rotate 45. I'm not applying really any downward pressure. I'm just letting the weight of the block do its job. Boy, you can feel the abrasive changing dramatically. I think it deburred itself almost instantly because they're tending to want to stick together already. These are 8-inch rounds, 1.5 inches thick, so they're kind of beefy. Already the two plates are trying to stick together. Where is that? I think I lost my, oh, I've already gone 360. I lost my paint mark there. You can tell I've never done this before. All right, let's see what it looks like after just that quick amount of work. Boy, they stuck together nicely. Look at that. It's already really shiny. That's very impressive. So now I'm going to do, that was number 2 on number 1. Now I'm going to go get number 3 in number 1. So when you first feel it on, you can feel a significant amount of grit. I mean, a significant amount of abrasion going on. Oh, you know what I forgot to do on the last one? My bad. The rotation at the very end. That's what I forgot to do on the last one. These are a lot to push, and they're very heavy. It's a lot of work. See why Tom went with 6-inch ones. That was my mistake. So I'm kind of interested again after round 1. There's still some alcohol. I cleaned off this width. All right, so let's try 2 on 1. Got part of my glove under there. That won't work. Well, they feel definitely different. And look at that, after 1 pass. You see the difference? Isn't that amazing? All right, so we got a few more passes to do, and we're gonna have to head up to some finer micron diamond to get a nice bright finish on this. But that was a really promising first start. Went from just getting the edges to nice completely flat coverage, except for a couple little areas here. I'm very pleased. All right, so you can see the flatness there. The straighter the lines, the flatter it is. And so it's not perfect, but it looks like it's less than 1 line of curvature. I notice each one of these squares as it gets towards the edge. I got to pick up the optical flat each time because I wouldn't want to rub it across the surface because it's charged with diamond grit still. So that's actually pretty darn good, I think. That's relatively straight. The corner of one continues on the next one. There's a little bit of curvature. So as it drops into the troughs on each one, around the edges, it drops down a little bit. When I was towards the end, these plates were all sticking together, so that was a very good sign that they were very, very flat. There's a different kind of optical flat next to it. It's got a beveled bottom so that it doesn't trap air, and you can see how straight and flat those are there. And these, I just picked them up. That one's making very good contact with the surface. Those are really fine. So here are my 3 optical flats, and they could be made to be shinier. They've got a decent reflection, but you could get these mirror quality with a bunch more work. I was originally using alcohol as a solvent because I thought, oh, it'll evaporate, it'll be great. But the water in the alcohol, it was 70% alcohol, and that water was keeping the plates apart actually and preventing the grit from doing its work. So I transitioned to lighter fluid like Tom Lipton used, and that worked out a lot better. Instantly it grabbed, and it was a lot harder to rotate the plates against one another because they were sticking so well. So anyways, I've got my 3 lapping plates. I think it's a very successful project. Thanks for watching. Hope you find it useful. Hope to see you next time.